Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the stories we have lined up for you tonight. At the UN today, Prime Minister Carney and Ukrainian President Zelensky co-chair a session on efforts to bring home Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. 2 people arrested at a BC Ostrich farm where the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is expected to begin killing 400 ostriches. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas unveils a new private member's bill aimed at keeping sexual predators behind bars.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump says recognizing a Palestinian state amounts to rewarding Hamas for the October 2023 attack on Israel. Canada recently joined the UK, Australia, and Portugal in recognizing an independent Palestinian state before world leaders arrived in New York City for this week's United Nations General Assembly. Trump told the UN today that those who want peace should unite for one purpose.
But instead of giving in to Hamas's ransom demands, those who want peace should be united with one message: release the hostages now. Just release the hostages now. But I always said the last 20 are going to be the hardest, and that's exactly what happened. We have to get them back now. We don't want to get back 2, and then another 2, and then 1, and then 3. Have this process. No, we want them all back, and we want the actually 38 dead bodies back too.
Earlier today, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a TV interview that he's not concerned about the U.S. becoming more isolated because of the recognitions. Rubio says countries like Canada and the U.K. will not play a significant role in ending the conflict in the Gaza Strip. And President Trump also used his address to criticize the UN itself.
It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action. I'm the President of the United States, but I worry about Europe. I love Europe. I love the people of Europe, and I hate to see it being devastated by energy and immigration. This double-tailed monster destroys everything in its wake, and they cannot let that happen any longer. You're doing it because you want to be nice, you want to be politically correct, and you're destroying your heritage. They must take control strongly and immediately of the unmitigated immigration disaster and the fake energy catastrophe before it's too late. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you, I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
Earlier in the day at the opening of the assembly, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said UN principles are, quote, under siege as war, human misery, and climate change threaten the planet. He went on to say humanity has entered an age of reckless disruption and relentless human suffering. Guterres says the UN's members nations have a lot of work to do. Also at the United Nations today, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky co-chaired a session on efforts to bring home Ukrainian children abducted by Russia.
And this year we'll introduce a resolution condemning the abduction and deportation of children. Forcibly taking children from one nation and trying to re-educate them for the benefit of another is an obvious crime. The UN must say this clearly once again. So the crime must be stopped, the felons must be held accountable, Ukrainian children must be brought home.
Putin has stolen Ukrainian children. Thousands of children have been abducted by Russia. Russia has repeatedly targeted the most vulnerable groups of children, including orphans, children with disabilities, children from poor families. Russian soldiers have entered classrooms and forcibly rounded up children, taking them to Russian schools and orphanages. Canada will intensify our work with Ukraine, with our European partners and the United States to secure the immediate unconditional return of Ukrainian children.
Carney says Canada will be investing millions into artificial intelligence programs, which will be used to help identify and locate children who have been abducted. And speaking of missing children, search efforts continue for a 5-year-old Lethbridge boy that went missing over the weekend from a campground in Crow's Nest Pass. BCN's Naveen Day has more details.
Crow's Nest Pass RCMP is advising that the search continues for 5-year-old Darius McDougall of Lethbridge, who disappeared near Island Lake Campground. At a Monday press conference, RCMP Detachment Commander said the boy went missing while on a walk with family members, which included siblings, and that an investigation is ongoing.
The kids were spoken to initially on initial point of contact. There are follow-up interviews being conducted with them today is when they're slated for. But essentially, family went out for a walk. Darius was not among the ones that returned. They went back to the site, searched for a good time before calling 911, and search and rescue was deployed immediately.
As of Tuesday afternoon, the boys' siblings are still being interviewed. As the investigation involves minors, there are child forensic interviewers involved in the process. 4 other organizations are working alongside RCMP in the search efforts, which include 60 ground searchers with Southwest Region Search and Rescue.
We continue to search areas of, we call them areas of probability. We are obviously focusing on the areas of highest probability where we are putting most of our resources and conducting what we would describe as a fine search, so almost shoulder to shoulder with our members, checking under logs and root balls and whatnot.
The RCMP announced Tuesday afternoon that the search area has been expanded since yesterday's and last night's search efforts proved unfruitful. At this time, police are not suspecting foul play. They just believe the boy simply wandered off. The family has told investigators that Darius is autistic, which could pose some communication challenges. He is described as 4 feet tall with short brown hair. He was last seen wearing a blue-gray hoodie and sweats. If you have any contact with Darius, you are asked to call Crow's Nest Pass RCMP at 403-562-2866. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
We have breaking news on a story out of British Columbia that has garnered international attention. 2 people have been arrested at an ostrich farm where the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is expected to begin culling ostriches after some of the flock was infected with avian flu. RCMP moved into an enclosure at Universal Ostrich Farms where Katie Pasitny and her mother, farm co-owner Karen Esperson, had been camped out overnight. RCMP would not confirm who was taken into custody, but did say the 2 people inside the enclosure were arrested. The fight between the farm and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency dates back to an outbreak of avian flu in December that would go on to kill 69 ostriches. The CFIA says Universal's 400 ostriches must be killed in compliance with international guidelines, but the farm says their birds have developed herd immunity and should be spared. Before RCMP moved in, Katie Pasitny told reporters their lawyer was filing paperwork in an attempt to have their case heard by the Supreme Court of Canada.
So we're just asking for all these animals to be tested, and here we are at risk of getting arrested to be taken off our own property, and our whole own property, our private property, being taken over. And no farmer, no Canadian should ever have to go through this. So, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 24 hours. Canadian Food Inspection Agency has said that the cull will take place within the next couple days. They have to set up. But in meantime, that we're losing our property rights, the rights to protect the animals that our family has raised for 35 years. We are not poultry. We are not a commercial poultry industry. And we are not food consumption. We are research that can help animal and human welfare. Watching my mom today fall to her knees multiple times thinking she's going to lose everything has been probably one of the hardest days of my life, and mine too, because you just don't understand. It's hard to understand how did we get here?
This story has garnered international attention from as far away as the White House. Among those interested are U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Dr. Mehmet Oz, who have urged the Canadian government to allow the ostriches to live. Dr. Oz has even offered them sanctuary at his properties in the United States. Today in Ottawa, Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas unveiled a new private member's bill aimed at keeping sexual predators behind bars. Bill C-246 would seek to amend the criminal code to require judges to impose consecutive sentences on individuals convicted of sexual offenses instead of concurrent sentences.
Since 2015, sexual assaults have increased nearly 75%. Folks, let that sink in for a moment. 75%. And offenses against children by 120%. Liberal reforms have repeatedly prioritized repeat offenders, sending the wrong message that protecting predators matters more than protecting Canadians. This practice is wrong, and it must end. Sexual predators should never receive reduced sentences.
Thomas says under the bill, sexual predators will no longer be able to stack their crimes and walk away with reduced sentence. Each crime would have its own penalty, and victims would receive the justice they deserve. And speaking of getting tough on crime, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives continue to push for jail, not bail, and they cite the revolving door for repeat violent offenders. Political commentator Brian Lilley says the Conservatives have it right on this one, even though the Justice Minister Sean Fraser lashed out, saying the Conservatives don't understand the law.
This whole system that the Liberals brought in 2019 has made a disaster out of the bail system. Now, there's more that needs to be done. We need to build more jails. That's at the provincial level. We need to build more jails so that jails aren't overcrowded and judges aren't letting people out because they feel bad for them. We need to speed up trials so that people get a trial in 3 months and not 3 years. But the bail system as it stands now is a get-out-of-jail-free card, and that has to be fixed. Minister Fraser is not much of a lawyer. He has less experience with criminal law than the average court reporter.
Catch the full interview with federal political commentator Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun coming up right after Business News. The federal government will begin testing out its buyback of assault-style firearms in Nova Scotia. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangari made the announcement today in Ottawa.
The goal here is to use the pilot to test the online portal and firearms collection process in collaboration with the Cape Breton Regional Police Service. We will also test the destruction of firearms with our external service provider, as well as our compensation payments to participants. Support from a dedicated call center will be available to all participants in both official languages. The application and key information will also be available in 7 Indigenous languages: Mohawk, Anishinaabe, Inuktitut, Cree, Algonquin, Dene, and Mi'kmaq. We want to be sure everything is working properly before we open the program nationwide later in the fall.
This program is really a way to help lawful gun owners stay in compliance with the law. We see this as giving them an opportunity to surrender what they are no longer allowed to possess, to prevent criminal liability, and to demonstrate that this can be an effective process for removing dangerous firearms from our community.
This move follows an embarrassing couple of days for the public safety minister. The Canadian Coalition of Firearm Rights circulated a recording of Gary Anandasangari where he suggested to an acquaintance that they should not worry about being arrested for refusing to turn in a banned firearm because municipal police don't have the resources to devote to such matters. The minister did not know he was being recorded. He's also heard saying the Carney government was only keeping this program to satisfy Liberal voters in Quebec. When confronted about it in the Commons yesterday, he would only say his comments were misguided. The candidate list for the 2025 Lethbridge Municipal, including mayor and councillor and the school board trustee elections, is now official. Voters can cast their ballots from October 8th through the 20th for both the municipal and school board races, which will determine representatives for the 2025 to 2029 term. The city clerk and returning officer Bonnie Hilford gives more information about the 2025 vote.
For mayor of the City of Lethbridge, there are 4 candidates. For the 8 positions of councillor for the City of Lethbridge, there are 18 candidates. For the 7 positions of public school trustee for the Lethbridge Public School Division, there are 14 candidates. And for the 5 positions of trustee for the Holy Spirit Roman Catholic Separate School Division, Ward 2, there are 6 candidates. Lethbridge voters can start voting at either the Corvan Ray YMCA or the Lethbridge Trade and Convention Centre. On October 20th, the last day of voting, electors can also vote at the Trinity Reformed Church. Voting times are from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. As for election results, based on the 2021 voter turnout, results after the election will take a bit longer as we will be hand counting the estimated 100,000 ballots. We anticipate it will take almost 20 hours for 20 teams of 4 people counting consecutively. We will be counting Monday night, but we will not have any full contest results by then. We are hoping to have results by Wednesday late afternoon, possibly sooner. Just depends how many voters come out as well.
Voter eligibility, the list of candidates and information about election forums and also meet and greets can be found at lethbridge.ca/election. Some freelance courier work could possibly end you up in jail. The Lethbridge Police Service is warning local job seekers to be cautious of fraudulent job postings that may involve delivery work of a criminal nature. Using email, social media, or other local buy and sell forums like Kijiji, fraudsters are posting delivery driver positions that may actually involve moving stolen goods, transporting drugs, or laundering money. Sergeant Kevin Talbot with the Economic Crimes Unit of LPS says this criminal ring is just one part of a more commonly known scam.
We recently saw an influx of grandparent scams. And what we're noticing is that the couriers that are involved in this are often local people that have applied for a job that they've seen online. And it's to be a courier with very few details on what the job is, but they can make some quick money. And all their job is to go pick up envelopes full of money, deposit it somewhere, and then move on to the next victim. In some cases, they actually know that they're involved in a scam and they're complicit. In other cases, they're just simply responding to an ad to try to make some money. And then get caught up in this, realizing after the fact that they were participating in this grandparent scam.
Police say scammers often use these unsuspecting people as mules to distance themselves from the crime. They add accepting such work knowingly or unknowingly can result in serious criminal charges. While southern Alberta farmers are still working on the 2025 harvest, some of the early returns appear to be positive. Ken Coles, CEO of Farming Smarter, says the season started off quite dry and it was an early spring. So a lot of farmers in eastern Alberta planted early. Normally that's a good thing, but this year it wasn't. And while conditions remained dry across much of southern and eastern Alberta, Coles says the Lethbridge area saw better outcomes.
One of the bigger challenges, though, is that the prices have dropped, and that seems to always be the case if you have a decent year. There's a number of tariffs on crops like canola and peas, and even wheat is now starting to drop. Overall, I think it's been a decent year. It's been a nice harvest. September's been a beautiful month to allow farmers to get the harvest and crops off. But of course, now we have to look at the challenge of marketing those crops and what's happened to those prices. Harvest is getting close to being complete here in southern Alberta. We're now taking off things like corn silage and potatoes, and there's still probably a few things left to do, like some dry beans I see out there, and some hemp is being harvested, as well as later on the sugar beets will need to be harvested. While we hear about it in the news a lot that technology is making big advancement, it's still really important to be grounded in what we're doing, to tie the agronomy with the technology, and to be able to very clearly add value at the farm level. And if it doesn't, then we see technologies come and go a lot.
Some of the major types of crops grown in southern Alberta include wheat, potatoes, sugar beets, and beans, alfalfa, and canola. Well, nobody's told Mother Nature that it's nearly October because our temperatures are looking more like July. Another 29-degree day is headed our way, and so is the 7-day forecast. I'll be right back with that after this short break. Well, I'm feeling like a broken record these days, but in a good way. We have highs of 29 headed our way over the next couple of days. Also looking at some 30-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts on Wednesday afternoon headed our way with that 29 degrees. But lots of sunshine there. Also sunshine 29 Thursday, down to 21 on Friday, which is still higher than average for this time of year. 27 Saturday and then 26 on Sunday, and then back to 29 degrees on Monday. Loving it, considering we are getting so close to October. Hopefully we'll have a beautiful October as well and have a lovely Thanksgiving in the next couple weeks there. So average high for this time of year, 18, average low, 3 degrees. 35 was our record high on this day back in 2009. 1926 is when we saw the record low. Most of us weren't around back then, but that's when Lethbridge saw it. Minus 13 was the temperature. Sun rose this morning at 7:19 and sunset this evening at 7:27. So we are sitting at 12 hours, 8 minutes of daylight, 4 minutes shorter than yesterday. Mainly sunny one on the west coast tomorrow, 19 for the high in Victoria, 18 in Vancouver. Both of those cities seeing fog patches in the morning. Those should be dissipating by noon. Edmonton, sunshine as well, and 15 degrees. 17 for the high in Calgary. Calgary seeing a bit of wind gusts there, 20 to 40 kilometer-per-hour winds. And speaking of wind, we're looking at Saskatoon and Regina also seeing 30 to 50 K wind gusts, but lots of sunshine and high temperatures. 26 for the high in Saskatoon, 29 expected in Regina tomorrow, 25 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg looking at mainly sunny skies as well. Could see some fog patches there in the morning. Now, as we get into the central part of the country, Toronto seeing a little bit more moisture than the rest of the west coast, for sure, than the rest of the country. So seeing 60% chance of showers, risk of afternoon thunderstorms, 22 for the high, high 24 in Ottawa with a mix of sun and cloud, and 23 expected in Montreal with partly cloudy skies there as well. Looking to the Maritimes here, Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, 21 for the high with clear skies. Halifax seeing a 30% chance of showers, also 21 there. 18 for the high in Charlottetown and 11 expected in St. John's with some showers throughout the day there. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Canada has dropped 2 legal challenges of U.S. duties on Canadian softwood lumber. The U.S. has accused Canada's softwood lumber sector of violating rules on anti-dumping, flooding a market with cheaper, subsidized products to disrupt a domestic industry. Global Affairs Canada spokeswoman Dina Destin says Canada made the decision after consulting with industry players and provinces and in the interest of securing a long-term deal on softwood lumber with the U.S. It also comes as the U.S. Commerce Department announced plans to nearly triple duties on Canada's softwood lumber to just over 20%. Canadian fresh mushrooms are the latest target of U.S. trade angst. The U.S. International Trade Commission will be investigating whether the American industry has been materially injured or threatened with material injury by imported mushrooms, alleged to have been sold at less than fair value and subsidized by the Canadian government. It comes after U.S.-based Fresh Mushroom Fair Trade Coalition filed a petition with the goal to level the playing field, asking for anti-dumping and countervailing duties on fresh mushrooms from Canada to offset what it calls, quote, unfair pricing and subsidization. Mushrooms Canada says the claims have no merit and is confident the investigations will confirm the industry's compliance with rules-based trade. Stats Canada says more U.S. residents came to Canada in July than Canadian residents returned from the U.S. The shift has come as Canadians have shunned travel to the United States in face of President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods. Canadian resident return trips from the U.S. in July was down 32.4% year over year, while the number of trips to Canada by U.S. residents fell 3%. The number of Canadian residents return trips from overseas in July increased 8.3%. compared with a year ago. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 143 points to 29,815. The Dow was down 88 to 46,292. The S&P 500 was down 36 points to 6,656, and the Nasdaq was down 215 to 22,573. West Texas Intermediate oil was up $1.39 to $63.67 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to $2.86 US. Gold was up $17.21 to $37.6445 US an ounce, and silver was down 3 cents to $44.03 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.21 per bushel, barley is at $5.56, canola is at $13.90, and corn is at $7.34 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.55 to $235.60 for the October contract. Feeder cattle were up $2.12 to $364.85. Lean hogs were up $1.72 to $100.52 for the October contract. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 72.30 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, U.S. President Donald Trump used his speech to the United Nations to blast the body for failing to live up to its potential. He criticized the UN for failing to end wars, arguing that words alone cannot achieve peace. Trump also lashed out at Canada and the more than 150 other countries recognizing an independent Palestinian state. Carney's Liberal government has plans to confiscate guns in what they are calling a voluntary buyback program. Many have issues with this initiative, including Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who will shed some light on this controversial push to confiscate guns from legal gun owners and other hot-button issues coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and our interviews. After more than 5 years, the Liberal government in Ottawa has come up with plans to confiscate guns in what they are calling a voluntary buyback program. So to talk about this and a whole lot more is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Once again, so great to have you on with us, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Brian, this is such an on and off matter. How will this work this time?
Well, despite the government calling it voluntary, on the tech briefing for journalists, the bureaucrats made it very clear this is not voluntary. You will either hand over your gun to the government, you will have it destroyed on your own dime, or you will face criminal charges. You will be in violation of the law. There's no voluntary aspect of like, yeah, I just don't feel like participating. You have to participate in one of the ways or face up to 10 years in jail. But, remember, Jeanette, these are guns that were banned back on May 1st, 2020, about 2 weeks after the Nova Scotia mass casualty. And we call it a mass casualty rather than just shooting because people died in other ways. And the government used that event to try and say, well, this is proof that we need more gun control. And we perhaps do at the border, but we don't need to take guns away from legal licensed gun owners, because Gabriel Vortman, who was the perpetrator in that, he smuggled his guns in from the United States. He had illegal guns. They had been reported to the RCMP, by the way, multiple times, and the Mounties did nothing about it. The government knew at the time that these were illegal guns. But this being the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're still in lockdown mode for the most part. They just used it as an emotionally charged moment to say, you know what, let's seize guns. They initially banned 1,500 different models of firearms and then expanded it to 2,500. They will tell you that these are weapons of war, that these are assault-style firearms or military-style firearms. No military worth their salt is going into battle with these guns. The guns include an awful lot of sport shooting guns like the AR-15, which has no history of being used in crime in Canada. I think there's 2 examples that I've been able to find ever. And it also
right?
It also includes a lot of hunting guns that are on the list. And the government's trying to tell you that these are weapons of war. They're not. So they've got this program. They're going to start with a pilot program in Cape Breton over the next 6 weeks. They hope to collect about 200 guns, and then they will move it to the rest of the country over the fall and into the new year with, they'll open up portals and they will allow you to register to turn in your firearms, potentially getting compensation, although there's been talk that the compensation will be capped, and if you're not in the early stages, you may not get any money for the gun that the government has made illegal after you bought it legally.
Yeah, it looks like not everybody is willing to participate, though. We've got Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith saying that police in Alberta not going to participate. Saskatchewan is much the same, and then Ontario's OPP, they've said that they don't have the resources to deal with this. So how will this work if your local police service isn't even participating?
That's a very good question that the government couldn't quite answer in their technical briefing. I mean, the tech briefing is supposed to be there to get all the tech questions out of the way, all the mechanics. How will this work? You know, the politicians can ask the political or answer the political questions of why are you doing this? Is it justified? But the bureaucrats are there for us to be able to ask on background. You know, we don't name them, we don't attribute them. It's just a, hey, tell me how this works. And when someone asks that, and they use the example of if you live in rural Ontario, where your local police service is the Ontario Provincial Police, they've said they're not participating because they don't have the resources. And the government official just said that, well, we've contracted this firm. We won't tell you who they are, but they will do mobile pickup. And perhaps they will meet you in the parking lot. They won't go to your home, but they might meet you in the parking lot of a police station so that you can hand over your gun to them there, and then they will take it and dispose of it. For the rest of the country, there are police services that say, well, sure, we'd like to help, but we're kind of stretched thin as it is, and we've got real crime problems on our hands, so we don't have the resources for this. The federal government is going to pay local municipal police forces to have retired officers come back in and work these shifts, to have off-duty officers work this, special constables, reservists. They're going to be paying people to go in and do this. It's still going to take up resources. We have real crime problems on our hands, and the government's talking about spending $750 million to $1 billion on this, and it makes zero sense at this time. But politically, it's something as Minister Gary Andesangri said in the leaked audio. Well, this is really popular in Quebec, and they voted for us.
Right. Well, speaking of that guy, Public Safety Minister Gary Andesangri, he was recorded earlier this week saying that he doesn't even believe in the program. So how can he implement it if he doesn't even believe it? And more importantly, I guess, how can he stay in his job?
So this was a recording that was released. So Minister Andesangri owns a bunch of rental properties in the Toronto area, and he has a longtime tenant who is a gun owner. And Gary dropped by to do some kind of inspection on the home and got into a conversation. And my understanding is I only heard the 20 minutes where they're talking about guns, but they were talking about something else at first. And then at one point, Andesangri just says to his tenant, who's only identified as Sean, oh, by the way, we're going to announce the gun buyback program on Tuesday. It's going to start. I know you won't like that. And they get into this long conversation where Andesangri admits that this doesn't make sense. He says to him, don't ask me to explain the logic of this, okay? He says at one point that this was popular in Quebec. He implies that it won't really be enforced, so you don't need to hand your guns in. I don't know how Andesangri stays in his job, but he's out there today defending this. He was defending this in the House of Commons, says he still stands by it. Perhaps if Mark Carney wasn't busy trampling all over decades of Canadian foreign policy in New York, he might have the time to deal with this and say, you know what, you can't even talk about our own policies correctly. You can't even deliver on what we told you to do. You've had to recuse yourself from terrorism cases. It turns out your phone number was found in an RCMP raid, in a terrorism raid. You got to go. I mean, for many reasons, this guy has to go.
Oh, gosh, so interesting. Okay, Brian, a new poll from the Angus Reid Institute shows the Conservatives leading the Liberals and Mark Carney getting poorer marks on many fronts. So is the Carney honeymoon over? What do you think?
I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of the Mark Carney honeymoon. Angus Reid Institute, major polling firm in this country, been around for years and years. They've got the popular vote at 41% for the Conservatives, 38% for the Liberals. The gap closing significantly in Ontario, not so much because the Conservatives went up. The Conservatives got over 40% of the vote in Ontario in the last election. I know you guys out west like to say, you people in Ontario couldn't vote for the right party. They got over 40% in Ontario. Ask Doug Ford, that gets you a massive majority, except the NDP vote collapsed in Ontario to below 5%. Well, now the NDP vote is back up at 10%, and the Liberals are only ahead of the Conservatives in Ontario by about 2. West of the Ontario-Manitoba border, the Conservatives have a strong lead. In Atlantic Canada and in Quebec, the Liberals still have a strong lead. So that's the viewpoint there. But on issues, this is where it gets interesting. Mark Carney was given good grades for things like, excuse me, promising to increase spending on the military. He was given good grades for trying to expand trade beyond the United States. But on issues like dealing with Donald Trump, he's getting a failing grade. On the issue of housing affordability, more than 50% of Canadians give him poor marks. On the issue of dealing with immigration, again, poor marks. He is, not delivering in the way that people expect to see. And even on the issue of the major projects office and the 5 projects that he has put forward there, a strong majority in this country want him to be focused on oil and gas. That is strong among the Conservatives. The NDP voters don't like it, and the Liberals are split. But across the country, it's 57% say, yeah, focus on oil and gas. And by the way, we're kind of lukewarm to the 5 projects that you've approved. We need a pipeline.
Mm-hmm. I like the voice that you gave to the Westerners there, Brian. Do we all sound like that?
No, that's my voice for people who are complaining to me about, me.
Okay, moving along here. Speaking of Carney, so Carney made it official this week and announced that Canada was recognizing a Palestinian state. So he says this is not rewarding Hamas for terrorism. You say it is. Why do you say that, Brian?
Because Hamas themselves have said that these countries that are recognizing a Palestinian state, that is a fruit of October 7th. That is what October 7th got them. The terrorist attack got them the recognition. And if you want to say, well, Lily, you're a partisan, Lily, you're conservative, your voice doesn't count on this, Erwin Kotler is a man I've known and covered for a long time. I met him when he was Paul Martin's justice minister. Longtime Liberal MP out of Montreal, was in the Martin cabinet. I believe he was in the Chrétien cabinet before that. Only retired as an MP a few years ago. He is a smart and accomplished man, respected on all sides. I've met very few people who don't have respect for Erwin Kotler. He wrote a piece with a law professor out of the United States and a former State Department official, and they said, announcing a Palestinian state under these conditions is a reward for terrorism. The hostages have not been released. Hamas is still fighting. Hamas is still stealing aid from the people of Gaza. They continue to embed themselves inside a civilian population. And all of the pressure from Canada and the United Kingdom and France and Australia and these other countries that decided they were going to do this, all of the pressure is put on Israel to stop this. Hamas was at the negotiating table. There was movement towards a ceasefire. The Americans were doing shuttle diplomacy, trying to get a ceasefire. And then Canada and all these other countries said, hey, guess what? We're going to announce support for a Palestinian state. We'll do it at the United Nations at the end of September. Hamas walked away from the ceasefire negotiations at that point because they knew they'd won. They didn't need to do any more. Just keep fighting and they'll get what they want.
All right, Brian, moving along here. So let's look at this one here. So Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives continue to push for jail, not bail, and they cite the revolving door for repeat violent offenders, despite saying that they will bring in bail reform legislation. So Justice Minister Sean Fraser lashed out and said the Conservatives don't understand the law. So who's right here?
The Conservatives are right. They were saying that we need to repeal Bill C-75. And Sean Fraser stood up and said, what the Conservatives don't understand is that this makes bail harder to get. Does it? Well, for intimate partner violence, domestic violence, yeah, it does. But for everything else, it made it the de facto position. It calls for the principle of restraint for judges and justices of the peace, and it instructs every judge and justice of the peace across the country that they are to release people as quickly as possible under the least onerous conditions. that is the law. It's not up to provincial governments at that point or up to individual judges or JPs. The law has instructed them. So that is the reality. If Sean Fraser wants to claim that the Conservatives are light on domestic violence, well, that's clutching at straws, to be quite honest. This whole system that the Liberals brought in 2019 has made a disaster out of the bail system. Now, there's more that needs to be done. We need to build more jails. That's at the provincial level. We need to build more jails so that jails aren't overcrowded and judges aren't letting people out because they feel bad for them. We need to speed up trials so that people get a trial in 3 months and not 3 years. But the bail system as it stands now is a get out of jail free card, and that has to be fixed. Minister Fraser is not much of a lawyer. He has less experience with criminal law than the average court reporter. He's from Nova Scotia, but he did spend some time lawyering up in Calgary, and it was all environmental law or intellectual property law. He has zero experience with the criminal code, and that should be frightening. Whether it's been a Liberal government or a Conservative government, you've tended to have defense lawyers or Crown prosecutors as the Attorney General and Justice Minister. Sean Fraser is an errand boy in this position.
All right, political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
When voters start marking their ballots on October the 20th, there will be lots to choose from. 18 candidates are vying for only 8 seats on Lethbridge City Council. Kelty Baird is one of those. She says she's hoping to bring a fresh perspective to City Hall. Kelty joins me now in studio. Kelty, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Kelty, you come from a business background, having run your own business for 10 years.
Yep.
Just tell us a little bit about your business and how you think it's prepared you to run for council.
Yeah, so my business partner and I opened Theoretically Brewing Company in 2015. So we are celebrating our 10 years this year. So we're a microbrewery here in Lethbridge. We brew all kinds of interesting European style ales with local ingredients. We're really focused on supporting locally and growing the community around our space. So one of the things we wanted to do with the brewery was create a community space where people can come hang out, local musicians can play. There's a huge art scene here.
Oh, cool.
So we really wanted to engender that sense of community. So I've been a community builder in town now for 10 years with my business, and then multiple years before that sitting on boards, commissions, and committees with the city and various volunteer organizations throughout the city as well.
Right, because I'm aware that you've actually served in our community on a number of boards. Can you just tell us what you've learned from those experiences?
Yeah, so the boards I tend to sit on tend to be city-oriented because I'm a giant policy nerd for city stuff. So I started with the Galt Board of Directors in 2013, I think. And I was actually employed at the museum before that, so it was very fun. And I have a degree in history from the university, so that's kind of my wheelhouse as well. It was a pleasure working on that board. That board taught me a lot about governance structure and kind of how a governance board works, because I was quite young when I was sitting on it. I was in my early 20s. And then from there, I went to the Municipal Planning Commission, which dealt a lot more with planning issues and permissions to build structures that needed new zoning. So worked a lot with the zoning code, got really intimately familiar with the land use bylaw, which is currently up for review at City Hall, and started to become really interested in how city is planned and that kind of thing. So all of that kind of engendered this wonder in me of like how the city works and how zoning works and how we build a community together. And then from there, I went to the Heart of Our City Commission. So that's the most recent, and I just completed my position there. So worked on, again, that's community building, lots of events, lots of grant writing and funding for local event coordinators and event hosts to put on various festivals and things like that. So again, very, very community oriented.
Wow, it sounds like you've got quite the resume when it comes to community involvement here. Now, you're in our studio here because you're running.
Yes.
What are your big issues?
So I think with everyone this election, big issues are affordability. So keeping Lethbridge an affordable place to live. It's a wonderful place to live. We'd like to see it grow. Keeping things nice for businesses, you know, attracting more local investment, really focusing on keeping local businesses going as well. We have a tendency at City Hall to shoot for large projects. I'm thinking like the Cavendish plant and all of these huge investments by these major international corporations. Those are great, they're really stabilizing, but we also need to look after the small business owners as well, which is where I specialize. I like to have really good, close relationships with other small business owners and really pin down what they need to thrive in Lethbridge. So affordability for people living here, business development for people who want to work here, and then community safety as well. It has to be part of that equation. I tend to focus more on traffic safety and roadways and infrastructure, that kind of thing, rather than crime. I think we're starting to get a handle on crime statistics a little bit. Our police service is doing a wonderful job. But for me, I'm more interested in how we can create a safer community for everyone living here in terms of our roadways and infrastructure.
So obviously you're coming from a business perspective, which means you put a business perspective on things going on in the community. This is potentially good news for small business owners as well. What have you heard from as you talk to small businesses?
I think that a lot of small businesses kind of view City Hall as an obstacle to get around in their business. There's a lot of permitting, there's a lot of fees. If you're not an expert in what you need to do to set up your business, it can set you back months.
Wow.
So that can be really frustrating to try and support small businesses. So streamlining processes at City Hall, reducing that red tape, and making sure that businesses are able to thrive because of good policy here in town, that's kind of my focus.
Okay, and then you also mentioned a bit about transportation, which seems to be a hot button issue as of lately, especially for those living on the west side.
Yes.
And you know, like it seems like not a day goes by where there isn't something going on, either like on Highway 3 or Whoop Up. So can you just give me your thoughts on the need for a third bridge?
Yeah, so I spent 15 years living on the west side. We moved to the south side when we bought a house in 22. The third bridge is an interesting project. There's not a ton of federal or provincial funding for that kind of infrastructure right now. So as a councillor, I would like to continue the planning stages that have already been set up. So a third bridge is actually planned for. In our transportation master plan, it is mentioned, and land has been set aside for it. The challenge right now is the funding piece, because if we were to fund it just off of taxpayers in Lethbridge, our property tax rates are going to skyrocket, which no one is going to want. I'm more interested in trying to figure out ways to reduce the load capacity on our current infrastructure, so the Highway 3 bridge and Whoop Up. So you do that by adequately funding transit and making sure that buses run on time and run at capacity, and more people are enticed to take public transit rather than get in their car and clog up the roads. Because the vast majority, if you're sitting in traffic, you are traffic, right? So we want to make sure that people can get where they're going in a reasonable amount of time on public transit as well. So that's kind of one of my goals too.
Excellent. And now you were raised in a policing home, and you touched a little bit about crime, but I'd just be interested to hear more of your thoughts on Lethbridge's crime rate, because it has gone down.
Yeah, so I grew up in an RCMP household, so I moved around quite a bit when I was younger. There's kind of an adage in policing. Police always deal with three types of people in the population, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they deal with the sad, the mad, and the bad.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so people who are sad are down on their luck. They tend to get involved in crime because they don't have a ton of resources and they're trying to make their way. So if we supply the resources and we can get them out of a poverty cycle, you can take that off policing's plate right away. The mad are people with mental health issues. So they tend to operate outside of societal norms, and they need a different type of support that policing is not able to provide. But we often just shove it onto policing, and that's how they're dealt with. That's not effective. It hasn't been effective the entire time. Policing is really meant to deal with just that third category, which is the bad. So those are the people who are actually malicious actors in our community. So if we can get the resources in place to deal with the sad and the mad, we can leave the police alone to deal with the people that they're actually supposed to be dealing with, and that makes a better holistic solution to the problems that we're seeing in Lethbridge right now.
Now, taxes and budgets are always a hot button issue in any election, whether it be municipal, provincial, federal. It's always about the money.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on taxing and spending?
Taxing and spending in Lethbridge is interesting. We hear a lot about how high our property taxes are. I'm a property owner, so I get it. But we also have a high degree of services in the community. So I would be really hesitant to say, oh, I'm going to cut taxes, because that's not part of my platform. I would like to maintain property taxes at their current level, because I do think that we pay high enough and there are efficiencies in the city to be found. And I'm not talking about efficiencies at City Hall in terms of salaries or anything. When you look at that, it's kind of a drop in the bucket. What we do instead is we invest in better infrastructure that is less costly. So one of the problems that we've had kind of North America wide is for the last 60 years, we've been building out this type of infrastructure that can't pay for itself in the long run.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you take a look at the two different development patterns we have in the city, it's kind of unique. On the east side of the river, we're a little bit older, so we have a grid pattern in our street designs.
Correct, yeah.
And then on the west side, we have this circuitous kind of labyrinthine, hope you have it memorized, because otherwise you're going to be using Google Maps a lot.
Of course, yeah.
That kind of infrastructure actually doesn't pay for itself over time. So you have a situation where the older neighborhoods that are grid developed are now subsidizing these larger lots on the west side. That kind of development pattern is really, really costly. It's the most expensive you could possibly do.
Wow.
Yeah, so going back to something that historically has proven to be less expensive and better connected, that's going to help us reduce our costs over time and help rein in some of these huge expenditures of infrastructure maintenance. Even stuff like emergency response times on the west side are slower because of how disconnected the roadways are. Because instead of having a grid pattern, you have cul-de-sacs.
So if Lethbridge needs to build out, we need to build out in a grid pattern.
Yes. So the municipal development plan that was passed by this current city council actually redirects new developments that are going to be developed in future to return to the grid style pattern, because that is the least expensive way to build. Yeah.
One thing I do like about the west side, though, like even though it doesn't have that grid pattern, because I do like the grid pattern, but I also love the roundabouts. I hate four-ways. So is there a way we can marry the two together?
Oh yeah, totally. Roundabouts, you can have roundabouts in a grid pattern neighborhood. That's absolutely fine. That's just intersection control. So you can actually build roundabouts onto any road as long as you have enough space. The street I'm thinking of that I would love to see a roundabout on, I actually live there, is 16th Avenue, and where it connects in a T intersection to 13th Street South.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, that's kind of right in front of my house, and it is a pain in the butt for drivers, I can tell you.
Yeah, and then some of those four-way intersections with the traffic lights, like the light cycles are so long. Like if you hit a red, like okay, this is 2 minutes out of my day.
Yeah,
and so,
or 5 minutes out of your day.
Depending on which intersection. And I think we know which intersections we're talking about too, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is not a retirement gig for you.
No.
Just talk about like how important it is to have younger energy on City Council.
Yeah, so we have a lot of great service from people who have sat on council who've been a little bit older. They bring a lot of experience, a lot of life experience to the table. Unfortunately, they also don't tend to be the most up-to-date on new information coming down the pike. So having younger energy on council, we're a little bit more involved in the community, we're a little bit more connected to the community, I would say, not to throw shade at anyone. And just having these new ideas that are coming out of colleges and universities where we are educated, and being able to more critically think about the information that we're being given and then up-to-date researching tactics. So we're not spending 50 hours a week researching these topics. We can cut it down and get to the point quicker. So, yeah.
Kelty Baird is running for a seat on Lethbridge City Council in next month's municipal election. Kelty, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.